So the kind people over at Goat Hockey have sent me 3 of their sticks to try out. Goat Hockey is a brand based around Tilburg in the Netherlands. The 3 sticks that they sent me are their Concave 60, their Probow 75 and their Lowbow 95. Now 2 of these sticks are extreme Lowbows, with their maximum bow point being 200mm from the head of the stick. The Concave also has a groove in the shaft to aid with drag flicking. The Probow is a mid-low bow, with its max bow point being about 250mm from the head of the stick. If you like what I'm doing here at Boss F Hockey, please help the channel out by subscribing, liking this video and leaving a comment. It really helps to grow an audience and means I can do more of this in future. So in terms of feel, the Concave in theory should have felt the softest of the 3. But in actual fact, I found that the Concave 60, because of the added stiffness that you get from that concave in the shaft, had a similar feel to about a 70% carbon stick, so it put it much more in line with the Pro 75 that I was also testing. Both were very responsive when dribbling, and you could really feel the ball moving around on the end of the stick. Where that lower carbon percentage came in was when you were controlling the ball, so when you were getting bad passes or trying to pick a ball when the opposition's trying to hit the ball long, that lower carbon really helped with absorbing the momentum on the ball and making it much easier to control. The Lowbow 95, when I was dribbling around with it, was very responsive. It had that electric feel of a high carbon stick. So when I was dribbling with the ball, I could feel exactly where it was on the end of the stick, and it gave me much more confidence in dribbling in tight spaces. The other side of this is that with that higher carbon percentage, you have to be much sharper with your first touch of using soft hands to control the ball and take that momentum out yourself. I found that with the Probow, it was much better for all-round dribbling. Flat skills were much easier to execute, keeping the ball rooted to the turf, under control. With the other 2 being extreme low bows, it's far easier to get under the ball, especially with the Concave. So I found when I was executing flat drags, because of the angle on the face, creating a ramp, causing the ball to bobble into the air just slightly. When it came to 3D skills, obviously the 2 extreme low bows really benefited from that face angle that I just talked about. It was much easier to get under the ball and lift it into the air, so if you wanted to lift the ball over a stick, it was much easier with the Concave or the Lowbow profile. When it came to hitting, again, what I found with the Concave is it felt much stiffer than it had any right to, being a 60% carbon stick. You could hit the ball consistently, and when you caught it with a sweet spot, the ball really moved. Again, I would say it felt much more in line with what I would expect from a 70% carbon stick than a 60% carbon stick, so that just shows that small difference that the Concave can make to the stiffness. Because of the extreme low bow again, it was very easy to get under the ball, so when you were shooting at goal, if you wanted to lift the ball high, it was much easier with the Concave than with the Probow. I also found that with slap hitting, with the Concave, because of the placement of the groove on the shaft, you had to focus on rotate the head of the stick slightly forward if you wanted to keep the ball rooted to the ground. Because of this, when it was getting late in the game, I was getting tired. Sometimes when I was playing swept passes, I was just catching it at the wrong angle and putting a slight bobble on it or causing it to lift. One thing I will say on the Concave, if you're wanting to play a slider pass, the groove in the shaft really benefits of keeping the ball under control and generating a lot more power. So you can really lean into those slider passes and throw them with a lot of pace. The hitting is where the Probow for me really shone during the review period. I found it really consistent, so it was great for hitting the ball flat along the floor if I was wanting to play passes or I was shooting on a penalty corner. But if it was open play and I had the chance to lift the ball for a shot, it was very easy still to get under the ball and lift it high into the goal. I also found it much more controllable than with the 2 extreme low bows when I was shooting. I felt like I had much more ability to place it into the top corners than I did with the other 2 sticks. In the hitting, the Lowbow 95 really shone, because of that extra carbon allowing for more power transfer to the ball. So with the Lowbow, I could really hit the ball much harder than the other 2. But again, because of that extreme Lowbow, it was very easy to get under the ball and cause it to lift. This makes it a bit of a double-edged sword because I had extra power, but if I did miss-hit it, it would cause it to lift more dramatically. When it came to hitting on the reverse, again, I found that the Probow was the most consistent. It was much easier to place the ball into the corners. Even though all 3 of the reverse edges were about the same thickness, it really did give me much more control, I felt, than the other 2. This is because the Probow has a bigger margin for error, because it's not as an extreme a bow as the other 2 sticks. Again, the low 95 has more power because of that extra carbon, and that really helped with hitting the ball much harder on reverse. The Concave was perfectly usable on reverse, and if I'd have spent more time with it, I'm sure I could have mastered it much better than I did. But of the three, that was probably the weakest. When it came to flicking, the Probow was obviously the weakest of the three. Because its profile doesn't make it easier to get under the ball, as with the two extreme Lowbows, it meant that it was a lot more of a conscious effort if I wanted to lift the ball, so I had to focus much more on getting the ball onto the head of the stick to lift it high into the goal or to play a lifted pass. The Lowbow was very consistent when it came to lifting the ball, so you could get the ball onto the head of the stick very easily, and then you could use the extreme Lowbow again to generate a lot of power. This is what a Lowbow stick is really designed for, so it goes without saying that this is going to shine much better than a Probow stick in this testing area. And again, the Concave on top of that, with the groove in the shaft, meant you could generate a lot more power with that profile by utilising the bow fully to roll the ball up and down and really generate momentum. The Concave really shone when it came to the flicking testing. It had a slightly thinner head than the Lowbow, that meant it was much easier to get under the ball. Because of that, once the ball was on the head of the stick, you could utilise the groove in the shaft to generate more power and really launch the ball. Much like with flicking when it came to overheads, the Probow was the weakest of the three that I tried, just down to the profile being more versatile, not as specialised in lifting the ball as the other two. Meant it was the most difficult. I was still able to chuck the ball 30-40 yards down the pitch. It took much more effort than with the other two sticks. That being said, I do think that the accuracy was possibly highest over a shorter range with the Probow, so if I was only chucking a 25-yard aerial, I felt I could land it much more closer to the target consistently with the Probow. With the two Lowbow sticks, as I said, I had much more range on the overhead passing. With a lot less effort, I felt it was much easier to throw the ball from halfway to the back line. I felt like the Lowbow was the more accurate of the two, because I was less likely to get the ball trapped in the groove and pull it to the left, but I also feel like it was easier to chuck it even further still with the Concave because of the groove on the shaft adding momentum to the overheads. What I did find with the Concave was that when I was chucking the long overheads, they had a tendency to bounce immediately to the right upon landing. When it came to drag flicking, I felt like the Probow outperformed my expectation. Obviously I knew it was going to come into the flicking element weaker than the two extreme Lowbows, but I thought that it was very consistent and generated a lot more power than I expected when I was drag flicking. The only thing I would say with the Probow is that I found it was much more difficult to add any deception to the flick, so it was much easier for the keeper to read. So it was only the one where I really put the ball into the corner that I found I was beating the goalkeeper. The most consistently good for drag flicking I found to be the Lowbow, so I could consistently get the ball to roll up and down the shaft on the Lowbow, and because of the additional carbon, meaning it's a stiffer stick, I didn't lose any power to the stick flexing, and so I could transfer more momentum onto the ball. That being said, I feel like I generated the most power of the three on the Concave, but because the power was a little bit inconsistent, possibly because of the 60% carbon giving the stick more flex than I'm used to, I found it much more difficult to aim. Like I say, that might just be because it's a 60% carbon and I'm used to playing with higher carbon sticks which have a greater stiffness. That being said, when I really got hold of a drag flick with the Concave, the power was phenomenal, and I also felt like I could get the ball to arc slightly in the air. I also felt that with the two extreme Lowbow sticks, it was much easier to add deception to my flicks, which made it harder for the goalkeepers to read. So, in summary of the three sticks, the Concave was the lowest carbon stick. I should have felt the softest of the three, but because of the added stiffness of the Concave that gives it its name in the shaft, it actually felt much more in line with the Pro 75 that I was testing. So take that into account if you are looking to buy a Concave stick from Goat. The Probow was by far the most versatile, standing out in consistency for both hitting and flicking. Despite the fact that it didn't really shine, it was so consistent and so usable across the board, and was easily the best of the three sticks that I reviewed for hitting on reverse. The Concave obviously shone when it came to drag flicking. It's what it's designed to do. It has an extreme Lowbow, it has a groove in the shaft to help generate momentum, but because of that, there was very high peaks of power output, so when you were drag flicking you could get more power, but because of that it became a little inconsistent. If you didn't utilise the groove fully, you wouldn't get as much power and it would throw off your accuracy. Likewise, when it came to hitting, it was very easy to get under the ball when you're playing with an extreme Lowbow stick and cause it to lift uncontrollably. So if you're trying to hit the ball into the top corner, you could easily put it over the bar, or trying to hit flat along the floor, you could lift into the air. The Low 95 was a very consistent extreme Lowbow stick. It generated great power for hitting and for drag flicking. It was very good for overhead passes, and like I say, it was the most consistent on drag flicking. It just gave you that consistent output that you could rely on. I really liked the Low 95 the most. That's mostly because I like an extreme Lowbow stick and I like a high carbon stick. All three of these sticks were really good, and I think if you're looking for an all-rounder stick, the Pro 75 is definitely a great shout to look into. Like I said at the start of the video, if you do like Boss F Hockey reviews and what I'm doing on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video saying what you want to see next. Share it to friends, and let's try and grow this community.